Welcome back and get ready for another dynamic presentation. You might know Kelsey from their Facebook page. If you haven't, don't walk, run. It's worth checking out. Today we're diving into how play and learning develop hand in hand. And what's fun is there is an intentional play on words with this title, because Kelsey takes you through how fine motor skills and other developmental skills through play prepare children for academic learning. It becomes so clear in this talk as we explore the sometimes unseen benefits of play. You'll leave this talk clear on the connection play plays when it comes to writing and math. And I'm certain you'll be more confident in highlighting these points with parents and administration. So get ready, because this conversation is filled with gold nuggets you won't want to miss. Let's do it. Hey, welcome back. And I'm so excited to have Kelsey with us. She struck my attention with your Facebook account. You are out there making a difference. Oh my gosh.
You. I really appreciate hearing that.
Yeah, you really have several of your posts. I saw like every friend I had practically shared it. And I'm like, who is this?
Some of them really strike a chord, especially if I talk about Bluey. Then everybody wants to hear those ones about Bluey.
So much. Yes. Well, I'm super excited to hear your wisdom today.
Yeah, so we were wanting to look at just kind of why play-based learning is even important to early childhood education, like on a body perspective. What is it even doing? And I called it how play and learning develop hand in hand, because I was going for a little bit of a pun, because as an occupational therapist, we tend to be a little bit fine motor focused. That's like the small muscles of your hands, your fingers. And so that's kind of the direction that I come at it from. But anything that I talk about with hands specifically, there's more application to the whole body and other things you do that aren't just fine motor tasks. But when people talk about preschool skills or skills that you need by the time that you go to kindergarten, there's a lot of worry about academic things. They need to know all their letters before they go to kindergarten, or they need to know all their numbers, or they need to be able to count this or that, or different types of academic things. And I went through and made the preschool skills that I think are important.
Yes.
And from a very just physiological perspective, we've got sometimes 3-year-olds, sometimes 4-year-olds being asked to trace things and write things. Even my kids in the school that they go to, despite the fact that I'm the crazy mom every time that we have a parent teacher conference, and the things that need to be in place before children are ready to write, to trace. They need to have core strength in their like abdominal muscles, the muscles that help you hold yourself upright when you're sitting, or standing or walking, or lots of things. They need stable joints. They need to be able to draw. There are shapes that come before you can write. The development of shapes is like innate. The development of letters is societal. Society is the one who made up letters to represent different things. Bilateral coordination means using both sides of your body at the same time. So sometimes you do things bilaterally where both hands are doing the same thing at the same time. And sometimes you do things where one hand's doing something and the other hand has to do something else. And both of those are different skills that need your brain to be able to work in different ways. And then using tools and using school materials like I understand why people don't want to hand their 2-year-old scissors, but I get a lot of kids even by kindergarten still where their parents are like, "Oh, well, we've just never trusted them with scissors," and I'm like never ever. Even when you're like playing, you can't play cutting some paper together with you by them. Like I don't mean give up scissors and let them go out the house, but like give it a try. So these are to me these are where I would say I call them preschool skills because they would develop in preschool or before kindergarten would be my aim with that. And when I look at each of those a little bit closer, so humans develop from the core outward or from the inside out. So your core gets strengthened enough first, then it's the shoulders, then it's the elbows, wrists, hands, and fingers. And so you can't shortcut, you can't put a pencil in a baby's hand and expect them to be able to write anything. You got to go through that process. And so even when you watch the way that babies and sometimes toddlers, depending on what age they're developing, things will move, they'll move their whole arm as a unit. The very first thing a baby can do is kind of like fling their whole entire arm across their body when they see something interesting or something that they want to reach for. And they'll even like surprise themselves to do it because they didn't know they could do that yet. And then it'll be like, oh, okay, I've realized that I can, I see that toy over there and I'm just gonna like move my whole being toward it and get my whole arm over there. And then eventually babies learn things like you can grasp something with your whole hand as a unit. And then eventually toddlers will get, you can pinch something with your fingers, not having to use your whole hand to like rake it into your palm. And that development holds true with writing letters too, that you have to have the core strength, you have to have the shoulder strength, then the elbow, then the wrist, then the fingers, in order to be able to do something like manipulate a pencil to be able to write letters, to make small little movements. And adults control a pencil or a pen with their fingers when they're writing. And when little kids learn how to write or learn how to trace, then first they'll start like moving their whole entire, the part that's moving is the elbow. They're moving their whole hand across the page. And then eventually they'll get to where they're just moving their whole wrist. But adults don't write like this. This would get really, really tired really fast. And little kids do get really tired really fast. They don't have the stamina to write for a long time yet because that's not the way that they've been doing it. That's not what they've developed yet. So if you're with me so far,
Yeah.
I've got core strengthening activities that children naturally gravitate towards if they're not acted upon by an outside force, which is usually an adult. Everything that a 3-year-old does, everything that a 4-year-old does is actually naturally readying their bodies for school later on, for school skills later on, because they will crawl through things that's holding up your body in quadruped that strengthens your shoulders, that strengthens your core, rolling around, flipping around, climbing on things, pulling. Like climbing is such a great bilateral coordination. That's that two-handed coordination. You've got to do your hands the opposite of each other to climb up something or to pull yourself up something. Laying down on the floor, hanging upside down, pushing things, pulling things, throwing things, monkey bars, cartwheels. Like you just put a 4-year-old in an empty room and they will suddenly do
there.
core strengthening is just all that they do. And so when it baffles me a little bit when adults are like, I don't know how to get this to happen or how to let this happen. But then it turns out that their other priority was making sure that they all looked quiet and, still and orderly and not chaotic. And it's like, okay, that's why, because if you let them be chaotic, they would be doing all this stuff naturally anyway. It's not like you have to do crunches or, do exercise.
It's not exercise. It's their natural movement.
It's not. Although I do have one little kindergartner who I work with. I've never said exercises to him in my life, but every time I go pick him up, he goes, "We're going to do exercises. I know how to do exercises. My dad and I do exercises." And then he'll like show me what exercises he thinks he can do. And then I'll be like, "That's amazing. That's so cool." And then we'll play. It's really charming.
Well, do you feel like the way we contain children, like I'm thinking, especially, I don't know if it's still true, but when I was a young mother, children were in walkers, jumpies, like they were not on the floor. And then now in preschool, everyone's having them sit. Kindergarten removing play. Like my grandson's kindergarten class did not have centers.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
That's
so sad. No, yeah, I think that that's definitely a big factor in it. And I don't go as far as I have an admiration for people who go full natural motor development or natural infant motor development where it's like, as much of the day as possible. We never put the baby in containers, all of these things. I have admiration for that. I did not live up to that standard. My kids jumped in exerciser. I think the only thing that kept us sane through my daughter's babyhood was that we had one of those little bouncers that goes in the door frame and is like a swing thing, because she would jump for like 4 hours without stopping. She was like, and she's still like that. You cannot tire this child out. she could crawl when she was 5 months old, and she was scaling our couch and leaving. And like, so we were like, how about you jump for 3 hours? So I
Yes.
fully understand why, in like people have competing needs with different siblings, or people have to work, people have things that they have to do because of their life. And so you can't just 100% of the time have exactly the ideal thing for every single baby. I'm not saying that, or holding anybody to that standard. On the flip side, especially for, if somebody's setting up a daycare, if somebody's, the problem is that there are like these things where it's like, okay, well, we all have to give these concessions because it's a society and we have to do other things too. But then it's like the concessions become the norm, and then there have to be new concessions. And it's like, it like does this slippery slope thing,
Mhm.
because somebody goes, oh, well, at somebody's home that, or, at your house, then the baby has to be contained in a container. Well, here we've got 10 of them and it would be really inconvenient. So why don't we contain them in a container, and then it just like, it escalates from there. And so, um, I think that for sure giving babies and young toddlers as much access to, but just like free movement, um, people are very worried about safety too,
Yeah.
and babies who have been given as much free movement as possible will be really aware of their bodies. Typically, sometimes there's like a sensory processing problem, and sometimes there are other types of problems where it's like they don't have the sense of balance kicking in that's going to make them realize, wait, I'm on the precipice and this is dangerous, or things like that. But for the most part, the majority of the average baby, they if they have access to be able to move their body without being super contained or super policed about it, then they will have a pretty good sense of what is dangerous and what feels risky to them, and what they can try. And my daughter is also like that, because she was climbing playground equipment like nobody had ever seen before when she was like 1 and 2. And I would be like right there, like ready to catch her, but she was fine. Like, she didn't fall. She had a really good sense of her body in space, and how she could move. And so I think that there's a lot of fear, and I think that fear is
Mhm.
sold to parents in a lot of ways. A lot, not just about movement, but like everything in parenting. And I think it takes a conscious effort to get over that fear, and say, like, they're moving, I might call their attention to a hazard that they didn't know about, but I don't have to be like, be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful, because, I can trust them to trust their body, and start teaching them the message that their body is trustworthy. Which is another thing that I
Beautiful.
think that kids
That's
don't get.
gold.
Yeah, from
Yes.
from school, because I have to undo this programming that's like, if I need to go to the toilet, I have to ask permission. If I need to drink water, I have to ask permission. If I want to stretch my legs, I have to, and it's just over and over. Your body's not trustworthy. Your body's not trustworthy. Deny what your body is telling you that it needs, and that escalates too. That piles on after a lot of years.
Sure
Um,
does.
so I kind of mentioned this with it because the core and the joints, the muscles and the joints go in parallel with each other. Muscles develop inside to out, joints develop inside to out as well, in the same way. And children do things, again, naturally gravitate towards things that build stability in their joints. So joints are, a join between two bones, or more than two bones, and they can be stable, or they can be like unstable if they don't have the muscles developed around, if they haven't developed in a steady way. And so when children do things that are putting resistance against those joints, then the muscles compensate, the tendons and the ligaments and everything compensate by becoming stronger to resist against that like mild play based instability. And that creates a more stable and more in control of their own movements person. And so all of the little things that kids pick at and rip apart and get into, the things that the twos and threes, if you leave them unsupervised for 10 seconds, then you'll look back and they're picking something apart, or squeezing out your whole shampoo bottle, or whatever it is
Totally.
that they got their hands on, because they know that they need to squeeze and pinch and pick and tear apart and look at the inside of. And in addition to all the mental skills that are going with that, because their brain is figuring out everything in the whole entire world. But it's also doing it's physiological and it's mental. Like, those two things are going hand in hand. Look at that. I'm tying it back to
Yes.
the name of the thing. Yeah. Um, I saved this picture. I really liked it. It's from uh Mountaintop Family Childcare on Facebook, and they just shared this picture of these kids digging in the dirt and called it pre-writing skills in action. And when people think of pre-writing, they think of tracing and worksheets and maybe drawing using a pencil, and it has to be on paper and it has to be at a table and sitting quietly. And it's not. Pre-writing is like a million other things, so much bigger than paper on a table. Um, and comes so much from that core strength, the joint stability, and moving with the big muscles before you can move with the small muscles. I actually just did an activity just today with a kid where we like thoroughly duct taped permanent markers to the ends of wrapping paper tubes, like a brown, like a
Yeah.
cardboard tube. And so we were standing and holding it in both our hands and drawing letters super huge on paper rolled out on the ground, because there's like a Jack Hartman is a YouTube channel who does these
Hmm.
little like ABC songs and stuff, and they'll do a dance while they're doing them, and so they're like drawing an A in the air, drawing a B in the air, and it's intentional because it makes you move at your shoulder. It makes you move in a
Mm.
big movement first. It's like you're learning the steps of a dance, the motor plan. That's the it's you're getting the whole shape of how the letter goes, the whole plan of how it goes, the whole dance of how it goes before you ever have to do that with the tiniest little most finessed muscles that you own in your body, because doing that in reverse is wild when you really think about it. To go into a 3-year-old and being like, here, trace this letter, use the tiniest muscles in your body that you have that are the least controlled right now, and hope that that's successful later on down the line for you to be able to write essays and stuff.
Well, I think this is a really powerful point. Was trained as a Waldorf kindergarten teacher before
Mhm.
I went to get my degree in early childhood education. And one thing I loved about the approach is that first, academics were not addressed until
Mhm.
7, which I
Right.
really align with. And when it's big body motion,
Yes.
it's telling the story that connects
Right.
to the letter. So it's all play until,
Right.
like really they're not reading and doing all the things until second or third
Right.
grade because they're in joy. It's
Yes.
like,
And the thing that I love to do in tandem with that, with being like, okay, all of your movements will be big, will be joy, will be delight, will be a dance. And at the same time, we will introduce the idea of writing as a thing to make your mark on the world, as a thing to remember stuff you want to later, as a thing to create because it's delightful, in the form of recording videos of yourself, recording audio of yourself, you telling me things and me writing them down, you telling me things and not telling me to write them down, but me being like, that's so cool, I want to write it down. And then you being like, wow, I said something that was so cool that somebody wanted to remember it forever, and I do all of that with the kids who I'm working with, because I slowly see them start to like light up with the idea that I have this kid who really loves to make up what he calls science experiments, and he's actually been really not really annoyed with my writing it down, because I would have stopped if he was truly annoyed, but he'll be like, Miss Kelsey, like come play with, like, we need to play, we don't need to write this down. And I'm like, no, 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 I know, I'll be there in like 2 seconds, I just need to like make a note so that I don't forget that cool other ingredient you said that I need to get for my office next time that I'm here, or whatever it is. I'm like, I tell him I have an old brain, and my old brain gets really tired and has a hard time remembering things if I don't write them down. And he's like, well, just remember it then. And I'm like, I know, I really wish I could, like, I wish I could, but my old brain will forget it by the time I walk out of the room if I don't write it down. And I've been modeling this for like a year and a half. And just last week, then then he was like, I'm gonna do the science experiment. And then he was wanting to see how heavy things were, how much they weighed something down, like a stretchy thing that's hanging up. And so he was putting stuff in it and seeing how much it weighed it down. And after like 3 of them, he was like, how much was the first one? And I was like, I can't really remember. And he was like, I can't remember either. I need to start writing this down. And he just went over to my whiteboard and picked up a marker and started drawing pictures of each of the things and how much they weighed him down. And I was trying not to stand there like I was like with my jaw on the floor, because he's acted disinterested up until the week he was interested. Like a switch flipped and he went, you're writing for something. I could write for something. And I was just like, ah.
Yes,
Right. That's everything I wanted. And in the meantime, everything else I was doing with this child was lifting stuff, pinching stuff, tearing stuff apart, cutting stuff up, ripping stuff, taking it apart to see what it looked like on the inside, throwing stuff to see what it did when it landed, like building stuff, smushing stuff, like all of this other things that I've just been saying, so that it's not just whether or not writing is meaningful, it's also whether or not his body is supported to be able to do it. And that's exactly what I want. So I had this one study, just that because there's a lot of studies about play and early childhood, and I didn't feel like just clicking through a slideshow of studies was the greatest thing that I could do with this time. But I did want to share, because I love this quote, that this was a meta-analysis. So that means that they took many studies and tried to figure out what factors are the same in them, what factors are different in them, and balance it out so that they could give an informed commentary on a big time period portion of studies. So they're not just saying we studied 20 kids, but they're saying, well, 100 people studied 20 kids at all different times and all different ages and all different things. And so that's what this is from. And they said meta-analyses identified significant evidence for play having a greater positive effect than direct instruction on early math skills, shape knowledge, task switching, spatial vocabulary. And I've got the link to the whole thing later on in the references, and I might be able to give it to you to put in the caption or something like that if people want to go look at it. And I always get skeptical when I see a ... and what the ... is that it describes all the types of play that they looked at, and so I needed to cut something for space. So it's like, for this type of play, that type of play, this type of play, that type of play.
My gosh.
That's what's cut out of that sentence. It's not anything that changes.
Crucial. Right.
But like, look at all those academic skills that are coming from playing. And I've seen this too. I've seen my own kid get interested in playing with a tape measure and then start figuring out math and counting things that came alive to him in a way that someone sitting you at a table and saying, well, measuring means that you try to figure out how big something is, and when you measure something, then it's for construction, and like whatever you would try to just lecture to somebody, that me saying no words and him finding a tape measure and coming to me and saying, does this have a 10 on it and a 20 on it and a 30 on it? And me being like, yeah, it does have those. And him being like, does this mean that you are, how much are you? You are 60, but you're not 60, because that's not my age, And I'm like, yeah, right. No, I'm not 60, but that's the height. That's the measurement, and it's like, that's the way that math skills develop in play. You explore things, and then they have a tangible, connected sensory meaning to you, because you connected with them in something you were doing and exploring and curious about, instead of something that like an adult decided it was the time for you to learn about,
Exactly, that it's not this meaningless rote bit of information that we're shoving in your brain because our standard said now was the time.
Right. Or this is when, we looked at 10,000 children and the average one learned it at this time. So this is the time. But that means, many of them learned it later. Many of them learned it earlier. Some of them learned it at exactly that time,
Well, and I think it's really interesting. My son, of all of my children, was the most physical. Like he was, like your daughter, had a real sense of his body. Yeah. He could jump on monkey bars, like swinging his body and jump off high places. And he even had a few injuries, but it didn't hinder him. It was just data back into, okay,
I'm already preparing myself for emergency room visits that I know are in my future. We've been
exactly
lucky enough to avoid so far.
But he did not start reading till third grade. And I think that, it's an unfortunate system, because when he was, I won't go into the long story, but I did research because there was feedback there was something wrong. And he had mighty oral language, and all of the markers of literacy were there. His interest was physical. And I
Right.
wish we had a system that honored all
Yeah,
kinds of processing.
absolutely.
And he graduated number 2 in his high school class.
Because once it clicks, it
It
it clicks.
clicked.
Yeah.
Yes.
And as long as you haven't, if it clicks, if it clicks late enough that the kid has already been dragged through the, I'm bad at this, I'm just bad, I'm just lazy, I just don't try as hard as everybody else, you know, if they've already started to if it can click before that, you're probably okay. If it's after that, then it's a struggle undoing that work. I do a lot of that in my job. And I want to highlight one other thing in this quote, which is task switching, because I have oh my gosh, schools are so frustrating for transitions. Like, people think of, if somebody tells me that a child is struggling with transitions, what they usually mean is that when it's time for the whole class to get up and go to lunch, or when it's time for the day to be over and everybody to go home, or when it's time for everybody to come in at the beginning of the day, that the child is having a real big obvious problem at that time. They're crying, or they're laying on the floor, or they're, you know, they're running out of the room or something like that. And people will be correct that the child is struggling with transitions, but not notice that the child struggled with 500 small transitions, because just as their brain was getting into their work, then it was time to be done with writing and do something else. And then just as they finally got the idea for the sentence that they wanted to write, then it was time to listen to a peer share their work. And then just as they got, you know, thought that they figured out how to count to the answer on the math problem, then it was time to put away the math and do something else. And the teachers are always saying, you know, we'll have time to finish it later, you know, it's fine, we'll come back to it, it's fine, we'll come back to it. But it's like, it's so much just brain switching tasks over and over and over, and it's like you just had time to get into your idea, or you and it again, it's to the average, because it's like, you'll have things where people are like, well, kids can pay attention for how many minutes old they are, or things like that. And then on the other end of the classroom, you have the kid who could pay attention for, you know, 8 seconds. And so they got done with their paper, and now they're bouncing off the walls over there because they're waiting. And so the teacher's trying to work to everybody's needs. But I just think that switching tasks is a really underrated preschool skill.
Mm.
And exploring it through play, where you're going, you know, I had this idea, oh, now I have that idea, oh, now a peer came over to me and they said a new thing, and I wasn't thinking or planning for the new thing at all, because it wasn't in my brain at all. Am I going to freak out? Maybe a few times, you know, because sometimes social play doesn't, like, it involves butting heads.
Yeah.
But then other times it's like, oh no, a new thing. This feels like a threat. Okay, wait. I do like this person, and I do have a relationship with them, and we were playing together, and their idea maybe does sound fun. So maybe I'll try their thing and incorporating it into my thing. And you, through play, get to explore this whole world of, like, nobody's in 100% control of everything that they're going to do in a day, and every little bit of everything that they planned, and everything's going to go exactly as they planned. And, you know, because that's not how the world works or how life is. But anything that can be learned through play is going to come with, like, so much less threatening of a threat, because sometimes it is still a
Yeah.
threat, but it's less threatening of a threat, if that makes any sense.
Right.
That it, you know, it's in a play scenario, you know, that the stakes aren't as high and as pressure as it feels like when everybody in your class is staring at you and the teacher's staring at you, and you might get in trouble, and you might get, you know, like, it instead, it's like coming through a medium that often carries delight and feels like the natural way of being, and all of that. And so I really like that they didn't look at only just, oh, play makes your academic skills better, but also that it was helping with those other types of preschool skills that need to be in place. And that's what I kind of got into with this really cool visual. So I named a few others that are like that are like task switching. There's also confidence, problem solving, lateral thinking, self advocacy. I'll have kids who don't feel like they can raise their hand and say they need help to a teacher because they're afraid to
Mm.
speak up for themselves. And some kids are just born that way. And then some kids, you know, it's kind of been drilled into them that it would be more important for them to sit and be quiet than it would for them to say that they needed help, you know. Um, emotional regulation, sensory processing. I've got this great picture that explains all of that better than I can do with my voice. And this came from a book by Sandra J. Stone. And I was seeing it be shared around on the internet in like the most oldest, blurriest version that you've ever seen in your life. And so I actually loved it so much that I traced it with my iPad, but I'm not the one who created it. I just took the super blurry version and I tried to unblurry it a little bit. It was handwritten too, the font was, and it was a little tough to read, and so I did it with a typed font. But in this picture, we've got the teacher of an early childhood center. It might be kindergarten. To me, it looks younger than kinder. Somewhere in the preschool range, somewhere in the early childhood range, and probably the grumpy administrator at the door with someone else saying, "What is this teacher doing? These children are just playing." And the children go around with all their little bubbles, and I won't read all of them, but I will kind of touch on some of them. We've got, I'm developing my mobility of thought. I'm practicing cooperation. Maybe his play partner had an idea that he didn't have, and he wasn't necessarily on board with it at first, but he got there. And then there's some kids saying, I'm following a mental plan. I planned something in my mind, and now I'm seeing if I can get my body to do it. That's amazing. That's such a powerful preschool skill. I'm problem solving. Something went wrong for me and I'm having to figure out how to fix that. That comes up constantly in school and constantly in play. And it's so much less threatening if you can practice it through play. I'm developing hand-eye coordination. That's one the OTs love. I'm testing my balancing system. That's one the PTs love. I'm developing gross motor skills. There's the PTs again. I'm learning how to take turns, standing back and being patient. And I can do it because I know that this thing is so much fun, not because somebody told me I had to. I'm developing number concepts. I'm developing a self concept. I'm learning to decenter my viewpoint. I'm remembering that I'm not the main character in all of everything, the whole entire world, but other kids might like to do things with toys too. I'm developing classification skills. I'm making generalizations about the properties of objects. That's like, I'm doing science. I'm doing physics, you know, that's what that's saying. And the teacher's saying, I value play as an important medium for learning. I've developed a broad range of developmental goals with a focus on play. This program provides children with play experiences that enable them to develop and accumulate their own knowledge. I just love that so much. And I know that saying that to many administrators probably wouldn't go over well. That sometimes people are really stuck in systems that are not open to what it is that they might know is true, that they might have to offer. And I'm actually working right now on like a thing for my page about baby steps, because sometimes people can't take 100 steps to the end ideal that they want, but they could take 1 baby step or 5 baby steps or whatever it is. And so if they've been doing everything at a table and with a worksheet, then they could do some things not at a table and not with a worksheet, but with movement. And if they've been doing, everything is the adult's choice, then they could do a little bit of the kid's choice. You know, if they don't have centers in the room, they could put centers in the room, like you were saying.
Right. Please. Yeah.
And then I think that the other side of this coin, so there will be administration, and sometimes the challenge with administration is just that they are looking at what is easily measurable, and goodness and value and worth is not always easily measurable. That's the challenge with administration. The challenge with parents is sometimes, I think the primary challenge with parents is fear. Because I kind of touched on that earlier. I said parents are being sold fear a lot. I think that's true in terms of school too, that parents will think, well, a good parent wouldn't, send their child to kindergarten if they don't know all their letters yet. So therefore, even though my child seems zero interested in letters, I better keep drilling them on it, because I can imagine I hear all the time, I want it to be easier for her when it gets here. I want to prepare her for it now so that it's easier when we get to it. And it's like, you will have a different child in 3 months. You will have a different child in 6 months. Not that their personality or who they are or anything like that, but like how developmentally ready they are for things. Yeah, the development, it's ongoing. Like that's what development means. And so, I think that when early childhood educators deal with these two sides, the one side is saying like, here's how we can try to measure or try to quantify or try to get on paper some sort of qualitative data or whatever it is so that I can make a defense to you about what it is I'm doing. And to the parents, it then you know, you're educating them to avoid the fear. And in both sets, then knowing why it is that you're doing what you're doing, like knowing these things like, well, the core develops before the shoulders, before the elbows, before the wrists, before the fingers. Saying that sentence to an administrator is saying, here's what's a little bit quantitative. He's at shoulders right now, so we've got to be there first before we get to the rest of it. And then saying that to parents is saying, I do know what I'm doing and I'm doing it for a reason. The reason is because this is how humans develop. And education, like adult education, not little baby education, helps it with both of those opposite, you know, challenges. Even though they're different challenges, they both can be, if not defeated, at least combated by just the early childhood educator knowing why it is they're doing what they're doing and being able to like verbally defend that or in writing defend that or however it is.
When I think in my experience, and I've worked public school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I never had an administrator who didn't hear me out and provide me, if not, I mean, like at the very least, I was given an hour a day for free play.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll take it.
Right. That's what I mean with baby steps, you know, if you can't get, you know, the whole entire day because that's not, you know, Common Core standards or that's not whatever the standards are where you are, like take what you can get, you know, and be creative with how you move around what resources you have to if you know that you have an hour of free play a day, then you can experiment with like, do we do better if that's 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon? Do we do better if that's one whole hour chunk in the middle of the day because then the kids can get into flow? Do we do better with a lot of little breaks? You know, like what's the and it doesn't have to even be the same year to year because your cohort of kids might be a totally different
Completely.
like people than your next cohort of kids is going to be. And so I know it can be really challenging, and I have a really privileged position speaking into this space in a job where I work with like 1 to 3 people, you know, at most at a time usually. But I do understand time limitations because I work with 1 to 3 people at most at a time for 30 minutes a week. And so like, you know, you've got you know, 8 hours a day is at least you've got something and I've got something, and we, you know, we figure out what we can do with the resources that we've got, right? You know. And so
And I think it's really important that we begin, and I'm so excited about your baby steps because my mission is to impact other public school educators who feel constrained and blocked in, that if we can begin to have play valued in the public school system, because we have universal pre-K. I was hired as a universal pre-K teacher in 2004. I think that there's hope. I know.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just protecting the power of play is so important.
And when you know the science and you know the physiology, like you're explaining to us today, and you can say it back, you know, you can explain
it gives you the a lot of people will know something is right, gut feeling, but not necessarily have the words or know where to find studies or what to back it up. And so it's hard to go into a meeting with somebody and say, well, my gut tells me that it would be better if the kids were a little freer, because then, you know, somebody will say, well, okay, tell your gut no. like
exactly.
I don't listen to that. But if you have the backing and you have the confidence, and I'm writing about that a lot on my page.
You are.
And there's a lot of references out there. There's sometimes people will ask me for references to things that are so general that it's hard for me to even give them references to, because it's like if you were like, hey, is there a study that says that humans breathing is better than humans not breathing? It'd be like, well, we all just know that. It's true. Like nobody studied that. You can't be like, hey, control group, could you all hold your breaths and see what happens? But there is a wealth of science out there, and we know that this is powerful, that this is needed before the writing comes, and that in the meantime, you know, you've got literacy skills you have to keep up literacy goals you have to keep up with and things like that, standards you have to meet, that doing those things with delight through big body movements, with friends in a big group, with moving your feet, with multi-sensory components to it, the more of those things that you can add, the better off you're going to be.
I love that. So powerful.
Got my reference.
Yes. Awesome. And we will have that also below as if there's any links as well.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate that.
Well, you have been I love your spirit. You're so much fun.
I'm loud and rambly.
I love it. Just right. You're just right. And I love what you shared. It's so powerful. And I think that we can take that and take it back to our schools and integrate it into our own conversations. So how can
Absolutely. That is my
people
hope.
dive deeper with you? Where are you located?
Yeah, so I do the most posting on Facebook at the Occupational Therapist Facebook page. I also have an Instagram that gets less used because Instagram has a character limit and I talk a lot. But it's just occupational. So OCCUPLAYTIONAL. Uh, and then I've got a website that's the same thing, just www.occupational.com. And on that website, there's a recordings and media tab, and that has a whole other training that I did that's free that's called Creating Sensory Spaces in Your Classroom. And so that is the other one that I think would probably be the most relevant to this audience, because people are constantly like, well, how do I make a calm down corner, type of thing. And it goes really into depth about both having a space for movement and a space for calming in your classroom and how you can set that up with even a small space. And so that is one that I think could be really helpful. If you're hearing this and you're feeling like, what is the next baby step I could take? Then that might be a good one.
We will have links below so people can go right to it.
People don't have to spell occupational right, because I still say the
I
wrong
love
word
the
half the
name
time.
though. Yeah, I have dyslexia, so I have a really hard time with pronunciation, so I won't
Yeah.
even try.
Well, half the
Auditory.
time at my day job, I have to say, hello, I'm Kelsey. I'm the occupational therapist. And then if I'm talking to anyone for my advocacy job, I say, hello, I am the occupational therapist. And my mouth does the wrong one half of the time.
That would be easy for me to do. Oh my
Right?
gosh. Well, thank you so much. This has been a delight.
Awesome. Absolutely. I would love to come back anytime. And early childhood educators, you have my heart, and you can, like, there need to be more of us. We can make a difference together.
Yes.